If you want to write great dialogue, you need to learn how to use dialogue tags. And today I'm going to be discussing them in detail. I have plenty of examples, so stick around. What's up, guys? My name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. One of my subscribers requested a video on the subject of good dialogue versus bad dialogue, and I'm actually going to be saving that topic for next week because today I want to lead into it with a video on dialogue tags. Now, what dialogue tags are, they're those things that indicate who is speaking. Brandon said, Brandon asked, Brandon yelled, Brandon whispered. Those kind of things. If you've ever read a novel in your life and you've ever seen spoken words in that novel, you have seen dialogue tags. They just indicate who's speaking. Now, it's not so simple as just sticking them in there. There's a lot of rules that go along with these dialogue tags, and there's also some advanced techniques that I want to share with you today. So we're going to go into detail. I have plenty of examples to help you out, and right up front, I just want to give you some very important basic advice on using dialogue tags. And one of the things you need to remember is that when you're using dialogue tags, the verbs that you should be using 90% of the time, 90% of the time are said and asked. Brandon said, or if I'm asking a question, Brandon asked. That's what you want to use because those verbs are so common that readers will just glaze over them. You don't want readers to stop and think too hard about your dialogue tags. So use the most common ones, just go along with those. Don't worry about getting fancy. However, there are times when you might need to use a fancier verb in order to describe the volume or tone, and that's totally fine when it's appropriate. If you need a character to say they yelled or they whispered or they mumbled or they groaned or they shouted, that's fine when appropriate. For instance, if you have two characters who are hiding from a monster and one says to the other, "Don't let those monsters see us," she whispered, that's appropriate because we need to know that it's spoken quietly. Now, one other thing to remember with as far as the basics goes, adverbs suck, and this applies to writing in general, but especially to dialogue tags. You don't want to be attaching adverbs to your tags. You don't want to be saying things like, he said loudly. Instead, you want to use something like a stronger verb. He shouted, he yelled. That's much better. Now I want to talk about dialogue tag location, and you can put your tags before, after, or in the middle of your dialogue. It's going to depend on the situation in some cases, but I think it's important to vary it up throughout the course of your story because this can change up your momentum, it can keep your writing fresh. If you use them strategically, you can make these tags work for you. Now here's a very basic example of before, after, and middle. So we'll say for before, Brandon said, pay attention to this advice, it could improve your writing. For after, pay attention to this advice, it could improve your writing, Brandon said. And for middle, which I think is the sweet spot whenever you have like just a two-word tag like Brandon said, the speaker said, whoever, pay attention to this advice, Brandon said, it could improve your writing. Now let's talk about punctuation and capitalization. A lot of people worry about these things. I'm going to make punctuation super easy for you. I'm going to say that the golden rule when punctuating anything with dialogue is that you always want your punctuation to come before the quotes. And I'm going to bring up those examples from earlier, the Brandon said ones. If you notice the punctuation, whether it's a comma, whether it's a period, it always comes before the quote. So Brandon said, comma, quote, pay attention to this advice, it could improve your writing, period, quote. The punctuation will always come before the quotes. A lot of people, they get mixed up because they're like, oh, does it come outside the quotes or inside the quotes? Simplest way to remember it, it always comes before the quotes. Now with capitalization, that's always going to depend on whether you start a new sentence. And for instance, let's take a look at the middle example, the one where I use the dialogue tag in the middle. We'll say, pay attention to this advice, Brandon said. When I start that off, I say pay attention, and that P needs to be capitalized because that's the first word in the sentence. We have to capitalize it. Brandon said. And then we're starting a new sentence, it could improve your writing, so we have to capitalize that I. So whenever you're starting a new sentence, capitalize the first letter. Now, if we were to rewrite that dialogue and instead of having it as two separate sentences, we could make it into one sentence that's broken up by the dialogue tag. And I'm going to rewrite this right now. I'm going to say, pay attention to this advice, Brandon said, comma, which could improve your writing. So pay attention to this advice which could improve your writing is one sentence. It's just broken up by the dialogue tag. And because it's broken up, when we get back to it, when we continue it with which could improve, that W in which is going to be lowercase because it's just a continuation of the dialogue coming before it. Next up, I've got action, thought, and description tags. Sometimes instead of just using Brandon said, Brandon asked, Brandon yelled, Brandon whispered, sometimes you want to use actions or thoughts or descriptions in order to give a little flavor to your story and flavor to your dialogue. And I'm going to give you some examples of these. We're going to go back to the basic dialogue from that first example I gave you, and it's going to be pay attention to this advice. It could improve your writing. So if we're going to add action in there, we're going to stick it right in the middle, and we're going to say pay attention to this advice. Brandon approached the chalkboard. It could improve your writing. So this simple addition of an action of me just going to a chalkboard, it conveys a setting, it gives an idea that, okay, maybe I'm a teacher in this instance. It tells us something that's going on, gives us a sense of movement, a lot of different things. Now let's try this dialogue again with a thought tag. We'll say, pay attention to this advice. Brandon worried no one was paying attention. It could improve your writing. So that tells you a little bit about the character of Brandon in this instance. He's worried about the people in his class. Are they paying attention? Should he be teaching this a little better? I don't know. Whatever's going on. And then finally, we'll do a description tag, and this will describe me in this instance. And we'll say, pay attention to this advice. Sweat gleamed along Brandon's forehead. It could improve your writing. So that description of sweat gleaming along my forehead, that would be an example of me. Maybe I'm nervous, or maybe I'm frustrated. There could be any number of reasons why somebody might be sweating in the middle of teaching a class or something like that. Next, I want to talk about dialogue tag frequency. And so many times people are wondering, okay, am I using my dialogue tags enough? Am I using them too much? What's going on here? And I think one of the best rules to keep in mind is that you always want there to be clarity in your stories. You want your audience to always be aware of who is speaking. Now, that being said, sometimes we know who is speaking and we don't need to be told again and again and again who is the one giving us this dialogue. So I've got some examples for you. And for the first example, it's going to be one where you just have one single speaker. And in this case, you only need to use a tag once. So here's an example. We'll say we're at a magic show and the magician is speaking to an audience. And it starts by saying, for my next trick, the magician said, I'm going to make the emergency exits disappear. The audience glanced at the doors to the left and right of the stage. Once the exits are gone, I'm going to set the building on fire. Nervous laughter sounded throughout the venue. Now, before I begin, I would like a volunteer, preferably someone with a cigarette lighter. So we have 3 different lines of dialogue here, and we only need to use a tag once because it's only one person speaking, and even though the audience is reacting to what he's saying, we still only have one person speaking. Now let's take a look at another example, and we'll say in this one there are 2 speakers, so this would be a back and forth. And once you establish who's speaking with your dialogue tags, you can actually drop these tags, and that's totally fine. We'll say we have a mother and son arguing about whether or not the kid can go to the magic show. Mom, can I go to the magic show? Tim asked. No, Mom said. Why not? Because I said so. That's not a real reason. It is under my roof. But all my friends are going. Good for them. What if I clean my room, Tim said, and cut the grass and get an A+ on my math test? Get an A+ on all your tests this week, Mom said, and I'll think about letting you go. So we establish who's speaking right up front, then we drop the tags after that first example of Tim and Mom. We know it's back and forth between the 2, but again, I like toward the end just to refresh who is speaking, and you just slip it right in there. What if I clean my room, Tim said, and cut the grass and do this, blah, blah, blah. Totally just reestablishes, okay, we have the clarity here, we know who's speaking, and we can continue on with this conversation without the readers getting confused. Now let's take a look at this if you have 3 or more speakers, and in this case you're going to want to keep the tags coming. And we'll say it's the exact same scenario. The kid wants to go to the magic show, but his mom and his dad are here. Mom, Dad, can I go to the magic show? Tim asked. No, Mom said. Sorry, Bud, Dad said. Why can't I go? Because I said so, Mom said. But all my friends are going. I don't care if the whole planet's going. You're staying home. She's right, Bud, Dad said. I heard somebody got hurt at one of those magic shows. That's not true, Tim said. Nobody's going to get hurt. So in this example, we start off with Tim speaking, Mom speaking, Dad speaking. We tag this just so we know who's speaking in each of these instances. Once I get to the why can't I go, I don't re-tag Tim here because it's pretty obvious. I mean, he's the only one who wants to go, so it's understood that he's the one speaking. But with the because I said so, that could be either parent, so I have to tag it with Mom. But all my friends are going. Again, only Tim would say this, so we don't need to tag him here. And then because we're going with a little bit of a back and forth between Tim and his mom, I don't tag the mom when she says, I don't care if the whole planet's going, you're staying home. And then when I have the dad re-enter the conversation, she's right, Bud, Dad said, I tag him there just so we know it's him speaking. And then at the end, I have Tim saying that's not true, just for a little bit of clarity here. Nobody's going to get hurt. So again, when you have 3 or more speakers, you want to keep those tags coming. You want to make sure that that clarity is working for your audience. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is adding or removing dialogue tags in order to change up the momentum and pacing in your stories. This is kind of an advanced technique, but it's really easy to implement. I have some examples for you, so we'll get right to them. Now, the key thing to know is that when you're removing dialogue tags, you're going to be speeding up your story. When you add them, you might add them in there for a dramatic pause, or you might add them in there to create suspense. And I've got some examples for you. We're going to go back to that scenario where the magician is addressing the audience. So we'll remove the tag from the first thing he says, and we'll say, for my next trick, I'm going to make the emergency exits disappear. So that would be just fast, straight to the point dialogue. If you just wanted to get it out there right then and there and keep up the momentum, that's great. Just get rid of the tag. Now, let's say you want to have a dramatic pause in there, and we'll say, for my next trick, the magician said, I'm going to make the emergency exits disappear. And that would be just a brief pause, the magician said, and then we move on with the dialogue. Now, if you really want to add some suspense to your story, you can add the dialogue tag as well as an action that hints at some kind of danger. So let's rewrite this and we'll say, for my next trick, the magician said, narrowing his eyes at the audience, I'm going to make the emergency exits disappear. And again, stretching that out in the middle, that adds some suspense there, as does the fact that we're conveying that he might be a nasty guy because he's narrowing his eyes at the audience. There's some contempt there. So I hope this helps. I know this was a longer video and there was a lot of information packed into it, so if you have any questions, just reach out to me in the comment sections below. Just ask, don't be afraid to. Question of the day, how comfortable are you with using dialogue tags? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.